Hi everyone, I am Lars Lindberg Christensen, and I'm super sad we can't see each other in person today. I know many of you have suffered significantly over the past 15 months, and my thoughts are really with you. Over the past 2 decades or so, I've been fortunate enough to start a number of science, education, and public outreach units like ESA Hubble, the IAU Press Office, the International Year of Astronomy 2009 with Pedro, the new ESO Outreach, and now I am starting up a new unit at NSF's NOAA Lab, which is the new US National Center for Ground-Based Optical Astronomy, combining the Certololo Inter-American Observatory, the Community Science and Data Center, the International Gemini Observatory, the Kitt Peak National Observatory, the Vera C. Rubin Observatory operations, and the US Extremely Large Telescope program. Today I'm going to talk about the topic of organizational communication. Astronomy has so many advantages over other natural sciences. Astronomy is one of the greatest adventures in the history of mankind. It's a visual science. It's an all-action, violent arena with exotic phenomena that are counterintuitive, spectacular, mystifying, etc. It has a large element of discovery. The field is moving literally on a daily basis with new discoveries. And then it touches on these huge philosophical questions of the human race that we are all interested in, whether we are lay persons or even priests or in between. Where do we come from? Where will it all end, and how did life arise? Is there life out there in the universe apart from on Earth? So astronomy can really be a gateway science to promote engagement in the STEM disciplines and counter this post-factual trend that we see today in society. Showing the importance of caring for our planet is arguably the single most important mission that we have as communicators, and arguably more important even than the honorable work of environmentalists, who often rub people the wrong way. As we are all aware, the universe could not care a hoot whether humankind survives on this planet or not. In our area, we often work in EPO, Education and Public Outreach, or communication departments. A communication department in a large science organization is a very multifaceted organism with dozens of staff roles and dozens of channels and activity types. In a 10-minute presentation, we won't have time to go into the details, but let me provide a broad brush overview of some selected topics I've encountered in my work. I've seen astronomy communication units in big famous observatories as small as a half full-time person or as large as 40 people. The principles of this talk apply to both small and large. Starting at first principles, the basics of organizational communication are just great stories and evocative visuals. Texts, images, videos. That's it. But of course, the devil lies in the details as usual. I think we need to start by examining the question, what are we trying to achieve? Try to ask yourself, what are you trying to achieve? One way of looking at this is that we're trying to solve an optimization problem. So in one sense, the outcome is the number of recipients that we reach times their individual importance times the difference we make for them in their minds, so to speak. So O equals N times I times D in this one scenario. So it's all about moving the needle and trying to get people to understand the importance of astronomy as a science and about caring for the world we live on. We could talk for hours about different audiences and their relative importance, but we don't have the time. It touches important issues of diversity and inclusion and about the need to be broad in our reach. It also touches on an inherent belief that many has that we can predict our audiences, something that I instinctively know is wrong. This slide shows a short version of what our field really is. It was prepared by Steve Pompea and Pedro Russo in a recent marvelous review about education, so the left side of this diagram. But as you can see, what we do is very diverse, and these areas on the slide may not even include everything. In some sense, efficient organizational communication is achieved by carefully matching audiences, the recipients, with communication channels. We can do that using traditional mediators like news and legacy media organizations, journalists, but of course also the more modern intermediaries like social media platforms, search engines, scientific publishing houses, many other partners. Professional communication in a scientific organization is still a relatively young trade and needs to move towards a higher level of professionalism. Although scientific and higher education organizations have expanded and professionalized their strategic communication efforts, the field is still young and riddled with pitfalls. In some sense, EPO has moved towards web-based digital product, social media, crowdsourcing, co-creation, beautiful video productions, etc., and away from analog platforms like physical exhibition. Here's a trick question. When do you not need a workflow? A lot of how we solve that optimization problem is arguably about process, how to get from idea to evaluation. You may not need a workflow if you're an artist, but even then, many artists actually have huge studios with lots of people engaged. So that also doesn't work. But if you are doing genuine one-off work, you don't need it. Or if your processes don't repeat, if you can always remember every step of your workflow, if you don't leave on delegation, on vacation, if you never change job, if you don't need to delegate, then you don't need workflows. But arguably, that very rarely applies. I'll be bold and claim that regardless of what we do, it goes through more or less the same production cycle consisting of some steps, which could be the 7 steps lined up here: initiation, production, approvals, publishing, distribution, promotion, archiving, and evaluation. In my experience, capturing the ideas is really what's most important, and having efficient systems to minimize the delay from idea and briefing to the work done. Still, our briefing needs to be complete. We have to remember that in order to delegate work to others, we need to capture what it is, where it is, why, who, how much, when. What we need is a fact-based decision process that's responsive to what our audiences want and need, based on continuous improvement informed by evaluation against intended outcomes. But there are other crucial pillars of your framework, like who are you, or your organizational DNA. That is your vision, your mission, your objectives, goals, deliverables, your key messages, listing your assets. All of these things need to be clear in your mind, documented, and then consulted on a regular basis, genuinely used in your daily work in order for you to be coherent in your communication. And of course, the most important part is the talent management. It is about having great creative people and how to balance the people you have in your organization, the people you work with outside, insourcing, outsourcing, and crowdsourcing. It's about motivation. It's about creating win-wins between the individual and the organization. It's about working with people's differences and using them as best as possible and avoiding single points of failure. It's about procurement, about the price of labor in different regions, and it's about timing. The more you can plan in advance, the better you can work with people in a creative mode instead of a firefighting mode. The most important thing is having passion for what we do. We should never forget that we have one of the most important missions in the world. This slide shows the roles in a communication unit, or the areas. They don't have to be staffed by individuals, but the list is arguably very long, and it feels like it's growing year by year. There are so many different facets to what we do, so many nuts and bolts and things to be done. But wait, there's more. Here's just a selection of 10 further topics that we could have discussed today. The importance of exercising exemplary information management by providing open, intuitive access to complete archives of digital resources. How to have clear ethical rules and abide by them. How to have a clear, simple, dynamic documentation hierarchy and use it in your daily work. How important it is to have critical mass in these areas we just discussed. That is so key and leads to efficiency. Everyone agrees that we need to follow our target groups. This is, of course, a central tenet to what we do, but we also need to be nimble and be able to reorient if it needs to be done. We need flexibility and freedom in order to be nimble. So these are two keynotes of a communication office. We all need to train and publish. That's what we're doing here at the CAP conference, but think about also publishing in the CAP journal. It always helps telling others about what you do, and we learn in the process. When we work, we also should make mistakes, but avoid failures. We have to experiment and push the envelope of what we do. And the last one is Pareto's principle. You get 80% of the outcome in 20% of the time. So being a perfectionist very often doesn't really pay off in that bigger optimization scheme that we've talked about. Mostly this all boils down to one word: professionalism. Don't ask what the field of astronomy communication can do for you, but what you can do for you. Thanks for your attention.